I'm Frank Sesno with PlanetForward.org, coming to you from our studios at the George Washington University. Energy and our national security. There's a strong connection. It's a very big part of the discussion about this topic. And today we're talking with retired Navy Admiral John Nathman. Admiral, great to see you.
Thanks, Frank.
You are on the Military Advisory Board of CNA, which is a research organization that serves primarily the federal government and military, looking at national security issues. You've done several reports. A number of them have looked very hard at energy and national security. In a line or two, what do you see as the most direct connection between our energy security and our national security?
Well, there's a direct correlation. There's a compelling and urgent operational need right now to reduce our energy dependence, primarily on petroleum products, a carbon-based liquid fuel. I'll give you the example. The best example is we transport a large amount of that fuel out of Pakistan up into Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a series of forward operating bases, both Marine Corps, U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, and U.S. Navy. And all those bases, if you go onto those bases, what will you find? You'll find generator halls running 24/7, 7 days a week, and 12 months a year. And so those products have to be constantly refilled because it's all going to be ground transported. The cost, we buy the fuel for about $2 a gallon in Kuwait. By the time it's delivered to a forward operating base in Afghanistan, it probably costs us $600 to $700 a gallon.
$600 to $700 a gallon.
A gallon, because of the overhead you have to pay. It has to be trucked. Well, it has to be protected, and there's another cost, and that's the protection side of it. There's young soldiers on the ground and Marines that are defending that, and they're very vulnerable to these IEDs.
But what's new about that? This has been the case of tooth and tail since war was first fought.
That's a great question, because I think the real difference is the planning factor. When the Marine Corps, Commandant of the Marine Corps, saw a report, he reacted very positively. He sent in an energy audit team into Afghanistan. The reason why was he knew that the planning factors for the Marine Corps going into Afghanistan and for fuel use and what we actually used was off by an order of about 6 or 7. And every time we see the price of oil change $10 a barrel, we see the Department of Defense pay $10 billion in cost.
Give me some other examples. Give us some other examples of how you see the connection between our energy security and our national security, besides transporting, paying for, to supply our forces in places like Afghanistan.
Well, let's talk a little bit more strategically then. Right now, if you look at the Boone-Pickens ad is a good one about how much money has gone offshore to pay for petroleum and oil. And it's a little bit over $700 billion in the last 2 years. What does that do to the value of our dollar, to ability to service our debt? So it affects our economy, it affects our ability to buy things, as it were, and to use that money more profitably, specifically for the Department of Defense in terms of acquisition.
You've also,
but
I'm sorry.
I would add this point to it. When you send that $700 million, $1 billion across our shore, you don't longer control it. And it goes to some countries that frankly don't care for us very much, and some that would do us harm. I'll give you 2 examples, Venezuela and Iran.
We're paying both sides.
Yes,
we're paying all sides.
Yeah, we're paying all sides. And so when you don't control it, you don't service your debt, it's 45% of our national trade deficit every month.
You make connections with national security here at home too. For example, you look at the vulnerability of our electric grid, you look at the vulnerability of consumers and military installations, national security, on our own soil.
Yes. The U.S. grid is the way the military sees the U.S. grid. It sees it in 3 different ways. It sees it in a security way, it sees it in a surety of power, and it sees it in an economic way. And let me cover those 3 quickly for you. From a security standpoint, most of the readiness of U.S. forces is generated in the United States through training. Some of it in simulation, but all of it demands a great amount of electrical power. So we need that electrical power to train with. That determines the security and readiness of our forces. The surety of power issues, do you realize right now we have a base in Nevada called Creech Air Force Base where we do reach back and control actual drones over Afghanistan in combat. That's done inside the United States. You need the surety of power to make sure that can be done. We have nuclear-powered ships that are tied up that need to be protected with that surety of power. And the last one is the American electrical grid is frankly a great advantage for this country. It's the largest machine in the world, 750,000 megawatts of power. And what we leverage off of that as a country is it's frankly very economic to use. So the U.S. military needs that economic leverage also of being on the U.S. grid.
So your retired military and now energy experts have weighed in on this. What do you recommend?
What we're recommending is that the U.S. move immediately to reduce its dependence on foreign oil. From a military standpoint,
which is not new. We've heard this for 35 years, right?
It's
it's
worth repeating.
It is worth repeating. I think that's right. So the question I have for you is, in terms of your recommendation, how do we get to that point? How do we actually make that reduction?
Yeah, great question. I think you'd be really proud of how rapidly the Department of Defense has moved on this issue in just the last year. All the service secretaries and the service chiefs have made this an issue in terms of how do we buy systems that are more efficient. They've all decided that there's a lot we can do in terms of U.S. bases to reduce our dependence on just another petroleum product. Drive down our carbon footprint, look at renewables, look at...
What, are we going to see windmills at military bases?
You may. There might be good places. If you have an Air Force base in Texas, a windmill would be a great answer.
Yeah, mounted on the plane, you could really...
Exactly. Yeah, it could be self-flying that way, but why didn't we think of that? But I think what we're going to see is a lot of push where the U.S. military can lead in terms of development and test and delivery in supporting the Department of Defense and supporting the Department of Energy in terms of this development of renewables. We just flew airplanes with a blend of a biofuel and a petroleum product. The best jet we had, the Super Hornet, F-18 Super Hornet. So if we can do that, a renewable blend inside of a tactical fighter, and we don't see any performance loss, we can do that for the U.S. airline industry. So see, that supports both the U.S.'s military side and supports the national economic side.
People want to read the report, where is it?
The report is on a website at CNA.
CNA.org.
CNA.org.
And the name of the report is?
Powering America's Defense, Energy Dependence, and the Risk to National Security.
Take a look at that report if you'd like, and tell us here at planetforward.org what you think of it, what its recommendations are, and more to the point, the recommendations contained in that report as they may pertain to the military, how they can be transferred over into the civilian sector, because this is really just a leveraging exercise as well as a call to arms, as lobbying device too for the United States Congress. Admiral John Nathman, thanks.
All right, Frank, thank you.
Again, on planetforward.org.